Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right when it comes to food, eating, and diet, but you still struggle to feel completely in control? Maybe like no matter how much you plan or track or try different diets, something still feels off. It's almost like you can never get it right. There's always new information on what's healthy and what's not, what's good and what's bad, what's safe and what's dangerous. What if the missing piece isn't the what you're eating, but the how you're eating? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck to bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. Today's episode is all about diet, but almost nothing about food. And that's because we're learning about what it means to actually listen to your body. This episode is about mindfulness, confidence, and behavior change all in one, specifically in a realm that I think most people would like to have more understanding about, their nutritional habits. If you've ever been overwhelmed by the onslaught of information about dieting, eating, or how to stay consistent, or what to do when you fall off, or all the other stuff that's out there, that's what my guest is here to talk to you about. Today, I'm so excited for you to listen to my conversation with Elizabeth Dall. Elizabeth is a behavior change specialist and a food freedom coach who helps women rebuild trust with their bodies and create consistent, confident relationships with food. Elizabeth combines science, strategy, and self-compassion to help her clients stop the chaos and finally feel in control of their bodies and their lives. In today's conversation, Elizabeth shares why boundaries are not the opposite of freedom, but the source of it. And she uses a great analogy about potty training, really, that makes mindful eating finally make sense. We also dig into the link between inconsistency and low confidence, and why trying to be perfect is actually the thing that's setting you up to fail. If you've ever been tangled up around food and shame and guilt and what to do and what's right and what's wrong, then this is the episode for you. Please enjoy this conversation with Elizabeth Dall. What is mindful eating?
Ooh, that's a great question to start off with. So, mindful eating is the ability to connect your body and your brain together with food. When we are a mindful eater or we have a mindful eating practice, that means that we are connecting with the food, how it makes us feel, our hunger and our fullness cues, and just really connecting our body with the food.
So I understand what you're saying when you say that, but if I'm listening to this, I'm like, when am I not? Like, what is the opposite of that? Like, aren't I always, if I put something in my mouth, I taste it. If it goes into my stomach, I get full. Like, where is the disconnect that people are missing?
Yeah, so we live in a chaotic world, right? We live in a world where people are grabbing and going. And I would say the majority of people, or a lot of people, are chaotic eaters. We're grabbing and going and just eating on the go. And we're not really paying attention to what our body needs. And so we're just eating chaotically. And when we step into the practice of mindful eating, it really is about learning to get in tune with those cues. You might be surprised actually how little we listen to and ignore those cues. So it seems like an easy idea, right? I'm eating food, it's going in my body, I listen to when I'm full, but a lot of people actually don't pay attention. We're just grabbing and going. And so that bridges the gap. That's where mindful eating bridges the gap there between people grabbing and going and not really paying attention, or even if you're on a diet or a plan that you have to follow, you're being told how much you should eat, when you should start, when you should stop. And mindful eating really brings in the component of you are in charge here and you have the ability to meet the needs of your own body.
I am so pumped to tell you about my partnership with My Body Tutor. My Body Tutor is the world's leading nutrition coaching platform that helps people find their healthy weight and keep it forever through sustainable habit change. If you listen to this show, you know that we do not suffer from a lack of information. Most people know what they need to change. The problem is actually sticking to it long enough to see results. When it comes to diet, exercise, and getting in shape, My Body Tutor solves this problem by giving you customized plans, one on one coaching, and daily accountability. As a bonus for you, they are offering $50 off your first month. What makes My Body Tutor so unique is they offer daily accountability with a real human coach. That's someone to check in with you, talk to, plan with, someone who can help you when things are going hard. It's not ChatGPT, it's not some algorithm. This is a real human. I know because I'm one of them. I have been working with My Body Tutor as one of their tutors since 2020. With so much nonsense and misinformation and just bad actors out in the health and wellness space, My Body Tutor is helping people the real way. They are changing lives. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Check out mybodytutor.com, where you can see hundreds of testimonials and reviews. And remember, listeners of this show get $50 off their first month. Just click the link in the show notes or go to mybodytutor.com and tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you in your intake questionnaire, and you'll automatically get a huge discount. On top of that, they offer a money-back, risk-free guarantee, so this is really a no-brainer. And like I said, I really do work for them. So if you've ever wanted to work with me personally, you can even request to have me as your body tutor. How cool would that be? Once again, just say Paul sent you and get $50 off your first month, start with no risk, and see how the power of a coach with daily accountability can literally change your life. I love that last bit. You have the ability to meet the needs of your own body, because that sounds empowering to me whenever I'm talking to anyone, whether it's a client or a friend or anything. And they said, when I do X, Y, and Z, it just makes me feel empowered. I'm like, well, that sounds like a good thing, because that seems like the place that we should be going, or that would feel best for us. So I think that that's a great way to look at it. It's interesting as you're talking, like it seems like you didn't say it exactly like this, but you're teeing up that like mindfulness is the opposite of chaos, and chaos being the opposite of mindfulness. And something else that I've heard you talk about in the past that I found interesting is that the opposite of confidence is inconsistency, or the opposite of inconsistency is confidence. Could you explain how you came to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So, um, I kind of want to bring in the word intentional here too, right? So, being intentional with our choices helps lead to confidence. When things are chaotic or when we're not intentional, we don't feel that confidence, right? We don't feel that confidence, and when we lack confidence in our choices, we insert inconsistency. What should I be doing? What should I be trying? Should I do this? Should I do that? Is this going to give me results? And we start to rely on what I call, quote, outside sources, right? Everybody else saying, this is the best case scenario, or this is what you should be doing. And there is some good nutrition principles out there, and good plans and things like that. But we sometimes forget that we have that inner guidance, right? Like I mentioned before, we are capable of meeting the needs of our own body. So once we start to step into more consistency, we build that confidence that says, oh, I can do this. I can be consistent with my exercise plan. I can feel safe and confident around food, treats, things like that. And we start to build more and more evidence that we can do this. And that's what builds confidence.
Yeah, totally. I love the idea of stacking evidence. And I believe exactly as you've said, doing something consistently builds that confidence. And when you're inconsistent, it's that negative voice in your head saying, well, you can't do this, you always screw up, and yada yada yada. So how do we break out of that though, when that has been the story literally up until this point? When I have tried every diet in the past has failed, when every time I go to the gym I hate it and I stop going after 2 weeks, when every time I've tried to save money somehow I reach the end of the month and there's less money than there is time. And that is the God's honest truth, and what I've been consistent with is the thing that I don't want.
Yeah. And that's the perfect description of, you have these stories that have a lot of evidence that this is truth for you. I haven't been able to do this. And there's a lot of evidence stacked that you can't do this because you've shown time and time again you can't do it. And so we first have to start by shifting those stories and those beliefs. Our mindset creates our actions. What we believe is what we do, right? And if we believe that we can't be consistent, if we believe we don't feel safe and confident around food, then that's the action that we're going to take. We're going to sabotage. We're not going to be able to stay consistent with it. And so we really have to start with the stories and identifying them and saying, okay, I see you. I recognize this is a story and a belief. And even though I have a whole bunch of evidence on this side, I'm going to step into a new story. Okay, I can be a consistent person, or I am working toward, or I am committed to. We're creating these statements that help bridge that gap. Sometimes I think affirmations, when we say I am, it feels very far away. But when we can say I'm committed to this, or I'm working toward this, it bridges that gap just a little bit, makes it smaller. That gap gets a little bit smaller. And from there, what we have to do is we have to start building evidence on that side to support that story. Okay, I can do this, or I am working toward this. So I'm going to maybe sit down and listen to my hunger and fullness cues, and I'm going to stop when I'm full. And that's one piece of evidence that I have that I can then use to say, oh, I do have safety and control over food. Or I'm going to build some evidence that I can go to the gym and I can be consistent. I can go today and I can go tomorrow. And then I'm starting to build that evidence. And that's how we bridge that gap between, the beliefs of this is who I am to this is now who I am.
Yeah, I appreciate that also the bit about the affirmations or the positive talk because I've gotten that in the past and I felt that in myself when you read all these things like make all of these I am statements like I am successful, I am thin, I am rich, whatever the thing is, and it's like but that brings this weird discrepancy because it's like, but I'm not that right now. And then I feel like I'm lying. So saying that I'm committed to, I'm taking actions towards feels more like a truth. And I love that you brought up stories. This is something that listeners know that I talk about a lot. I've done tons of episodes on stories with guests by myself. And I actually had a guest on here recently, Britt Frank, who is a therapist. She wrote a book called Getting Unstuck. And the way she summed it up was so good. She just said, when we're thinking about stories, all we have to do is ask ourselves, is this true? And is this useful? And it's like when those two questions in a row will unravel just about every story that's keeping us stuck. Because is this true? That takes away 90% of them because I can't, I'm dumb, I'm less than, I'm this, I'm that. It's like usually it's just plain not true factually. It's a feeling, it could be, but it's not true in the sense of it's a fact. And then even if it is true, is this useful? Gets rid of the other 99% because it's like, no, there's never a time when getting down on yourself is really useful. And I brought up before consistency, and then you said intention. And I love the idea of like playing with words. So one thing that I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this conversation with you is like I've heard you talk about mindful eating before, but then also intuitive eating. And then there's also food freedom. So I'm wondering, are all of these things the same? Is there a difference? Like, how do we start to, what is one come before the other? Like, what is the difference? What is the similarities?
Yeah, and there is a lot of information out there that differs, and so I think that's really good to identify what this means and kind of help listeners come to their own conclusion about what food freedom means in their life. So, food freedom really is the ultimate. So, I'm going to kind of start there. Food freedom is a place where you feel safe and confident with food and you still have parameters with food. There's a misconception that food freedom is I can eat what I want when I want, no regard to health. There's a freedom. Well, the reality is that boundaries still bring freedom. So, food freedom is a happy relationship with food. I didn't say perfect relationship with food, right? It's a relationship with food where you recognize your relationship with food, you recognize hunger, fullness cues, all of these things, and what you're putting in your body. And then you create kind of a lifestyle of that, a lifestyle of food freedom. And I tell my clients food freedom is not about having a perfect relationship with food. It's not about never overeating occasionally or maybe having an emotional eating episode. It's about returning to the core quicker, right? So if we're losing control, emotional eating all the time, that's not food freedom. Food freedom is being able to return to our habits, our nutrition habits, quicker when we get off, and most of the time having a good balance with food. So that's like the big picture of food freedom. Intuitive eating, mindful eating, I think they're fairly interchangeable. It's like you said, it's kind of that play on words. We're intuitive, intentional, mindful. It's all about reconnecting with the cues and the signals that your body is trying to give you. So, mindful and intuitive eating is the practice that helps us achieve food freedom.
That makes a lot of sense. Something you said there as you were discussing food freedom, though, was boundaries bring freedom. Could you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I was trying to think if there's an analogy that I could kind of compare it to. I guess I think of like let's just say you're at a four-way stop and there's stop signs, right? There's a reason there are stop signs because it helps the flow of traffic. It helps make it so that four cars that approach at once don't all go through and crash. There's a boundary there that says, okay, stop here for safety, look both ways and then proceed. And if we didn't have that boundary, then it would be chaos, not freedom. Chaos, not freedom. And so it's the same thing with food. Telling yourself I can eat all the cookies I want and all the things I want, it doesn't give that respect for your body and your health. We want to have that respect and build that confidence to say, I feel good in my body. And we do know that having unlimited treats doesn't lead to a good feeling in our body. And so that's really what those boundaries create is it creates almost that safety, kind of like the driving analogy. It creates that safety of I have this boundary and I can still move forward. I just have to be aware of it.
Yeah, it's a great analogy that you came up with on the fly. Good for you. That was a good one. It's exactly that. It's safety, right? Exactly what you said. It's like the boundaries create safety. And there's a reason we apply these boundaries to ourselves, our society. So you can look at laws are the same thing. You could think a world without laws is a quote unquote free world, but the laws allow us to go outside and not have to worry about being attacked or robbed or mugged or a million other things because we live in a society that are governed by laws. So it is a theoretical restriction in the short term, but what we gain from that is the safety, both literally and psychologically, that allow us to go about our day-to-day lives. But it's interesting, you said chaos, and then on the other side of that was freedom. And then earlier you said chaos is the opposite of mindfulness. So that if I'm doing basic algebra, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And that means mindfulness is freedom. If I'm following the train of thought, we see like all roads lead to the same place. And although it feels restrictive, like you just said, like people are like, oh, but I want all the candy, I want all of the things. It's like by a little bit of restriction, again, not outright restriction. I can never have this thing. There's a sweet spot to be had there and a way to balance it. But by restricting yourself a little, it frees you up to not have to think about this stuff so much. That's the benefit that I've seen. A lot of people, when I've done nutrition coaching in the past, all types of different coaching. It's like when the thing that people are usually trying to change, it usually takes up so much of their mental energy, so much of their brain space. Like, oh, like you said, I've tried this so many times and I keep failing and I really want the result and it sucks so much and and it's like to then put restrictions on it. Like, yes, it pulls you back a bit, but what you gain from that, the safety from the stop signs, is the freedom to not have to worry about that thing so much. So when you're working with someone, how do you get them to put those boundaries on in the beginning when it feels like they don't want to give up what they have?
Yeah. And as you were talking, I wrote down the phrase mindfulness breeds confidence. So I think that really segues really well into this. And I have three kids. So I'm going to share a funny analogy, a potty training analogy. When we are potty training a child, at least in my experience, when we're first in it, when we're first starting, we are all hands on deck. It is like you stay home, you don't leave. You're like, tell me when you need to go potty, like over and over and over. And you're honed in on it, you're focused on it. And slowly you start to be able to venture out. You start to be able to say, okay, we'll go outside and you'll be okay. And the kid starts to learn those cues. And eventually you're able to go out and the child knows how to use those cues in public. It knows how to use the public bathroom or whatever. And this is very similar. I teach my clients and students that sometimes you have to do some mindful eating potty training where it's at first, it takes some focus and some effort where it's like, okay, we're going to actually sit down for a meal. And this might be foreign for some people, right? Where we actually sit down undistracted for a meal and pay attention. Pay attention to how we're feeling when we start the meal. Pay attention to the food, the satisfaction factor of the food, right? Is this serving me? How am I feeling? Is it tasting good? And then listening to those cues that your body says, I'm done. And so many people have either ignored those cues or don't even recognize them. So it's that initial like we've got to build up this practice. Mindful eating is a practice. But as we've been talking, once we've really potty trained that, when we understand those skills and that practice can go with us at a restaurant, at an event, and we know how to connect with our body in those scenarios because we have started with the focus at home.
I love that analogy of the potty training. It points to the reality with all of this. And again, we're using diet as an analogy here because we're talking about food freedom and stuff, but anyone listening, realize this is everything in life. This is any habits that you're trying to build. This is anything that you're trying to change. I do think it's important to talk about food because food is the one thing that we do all have in common, and more people than not have something to change about their health, their dietary intake, their weight, or something like that. It's all the same. But the point of with the potty training thing is like it's going to be harder before it gets easier. And I think this is something that people have to come to grips with because the big word right now is habits. I was looking at your bookshelf behind you earlier for people listening or not seeing. I see Atomic Habits, I see Tiny Habits, two of my favorite books. We talk about habit books a lot on here, and everyone wants it to be a habit. How do I make this a habit? How do I make eating healthy a habit? How do I make exercise a habit? Or the even more cliche lifestyle. How do I make it a lifestyle? And they say that, I think, with the idea that eventually it's going to be easy, right? It's like someone who's just starting running and their friend loves running. They go, "Oh man, you'll love it once you get into it." Or once you lose the weight, then you love dieting. But there's that hard part in the beginning that people want to gloss over because it's like, well, if it's a habit implies that it goes on automatically. It's a subconscious thing that just happens without our conscious effort. So who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to go on to autopilot through all of the hard stuff in life? But just like, to use your analogy, potty training, pretty sure everyone listening to this knows how to use the bathroom. It's not a very thoughtful thing. But there was a time in your life many, many, many years ago where it was a very thoughtful thing and you missed the toilet and you struggled with it. And it took a lot of effort and you cried and your mom cried and a million other things happened. So I appreciate that analogy a lot. I think it's just important to remind people. But when we think about the things that are so hard when we don't want them to be, or we think they quote unquote shouldn't be, that it shouldn't be this hard. It's not supposed to be this hard. I don't want it to be this hard. A lot of times, what feelings start to come up are guilt and shame. So, how do we start to get away from these? Because those negative feelings then spiral and become the very thing that keep us stuck in inaction.
Consistency does not equal perfection. And I think that's a really important mindset that we need to shift because a lot of times when we are stepping into creating change and habits, we have expectations of perfection. I mean, we see it very much, in the diet culture world where it's like, okay, I set up this perfect plan, I follow this perfect plan, I'm going to get these perfect results. And the reality is, none of us have a perfect life, right? Things get busy, we get tired, we get stressed, right? Life happens. And so when we set an expectation that things are going to be perfect, That's insert guilt and shame right there. That's where they come from. Guilt and shame are not so much a result of failure, they're a result of not meeting your expectation. And so often that expectation is truthfully unrealistic because we want it to be perfect, because that outside noise that I kind of shared before, right? Those plans say, this is how you do it perfectly. These are the results you get. And we've been trained kind of for so long to hear that narrative that it's a little bit hard to kind of reconnect, tap into our bodies and say, okay, I know I'm capable of knowing this. I can step into consistency without being perfect. I was just thinking about this because it kind of makes me a little vulnerable, but I think it's really powerful. I'm a food freedom behavior change coach, right? So I teach women how to have a good relationship with their food and their bodies. And a few weeks ago, I just found myself doing a little emotional eating. And I was like, wait, I'm the coach. Like, what is happening here? And I was just like, what's going on? I want to keep eating, or I'm just like, I don't even care, screw this, right? And I was getting in kind of that mindset. And this is where the concept of food freedom, and we can make it, expand it to, you know, exercise, like fitness freedom. We can do all of that. But I thought to myself, this is perfect because this is an opportunity that I have to identify something's off. Something's off in my life. And I've got these expectations and clearly something's off, and it's causing me to experience this emotion, which then is leading me to eating, right? That's a really common habit loop that people face is I'm experiencing emotion, so then I go eat. And it was a really cool opportunity for me to remember that I'm human, and food freedom here is the return, the quick return. Oh, I identified these emotions, I was feeling them, and I dealt with those emotions in my life, and the emotional eating stopped. And that's really what freedom in this arena is.
Yeah, well, one, I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable. I always love when I have a lot of coaches, therapists, change facilitators, we'll call them, on this podcast. And I always love when people talk about their own personal struggles, right? Because I think it's important to point out that no one's perfect. You're not, I'm not, you mess up, I mess up, we all mess up. That's, again, being human. And I wrote down, I'm paraphrasing you a bit, but I really liked what you said in the beginning there. It's like, you can't have a perfect plan when life isn't perfect. And inherently, we have that, it's going to bring a mismatch. And everything runs on expectations. As you said, we have these unrealistic expectations, and any expectations at all really are going to eventually disappoint us, I've come to find, because we don't get to control outcomes. We only get to control inputs. And yet, it is the very expectation of the result that gets me to do the thing in the first place. So how do you bridge that gap where it's like, well, yeah, of course I expect to lose weight doing this diet. If I didn't, I wouldn't do the damn diet.
I always tell people, if you're mad at your outcome, if you're mad at your weight, if you're mad at your tiredness, all of that, don't get mad at you or the body, get mad at your habits. So, when the way that we bridge the gap is we focus on the process. We hold the outcome. It's okay to hold that goal, to say, this is what I'm working toward. But what gets us there is the process. So we then focus on the habits. Okay, this is the goal. So then I break it down and say, what habits should help me, because you mentioned we don't always have control over outside sources and things. We don't know how fast things are going to go. I'm not a huge believer in timelines personally, because change happens differently for everyone. But knowing that, okay, I can hold to this outcome, this goal that I have, but then focus on the habits, and then I have data, right? So then maybe I weigh myself, or I measure myself, or I'm looking for outcomes, and I'm getting the outcome I want. So the data is, hey, the habits are working. Or I'm not getting it, I go back and look at the habits. But so often we internalize, see, I'm lazy, see, I'm not motivated. We create this identity and this story. And the reality is it's just the habits that we need to fix.
Yeah, perfectly said. Can't have said it better myself. That's exactly how I teach it as well. It's, focus on the inputs, and the outcomes will take care of themselves. You said just there, like, we have more data, and when you were talking about your own struggles, you're like, okay, well, I understand what's not working, and it's like it's that exact mindset of looking at things objectively, like a scientist. When a scientist has a hypothesis, they're a decent scientist, at least they don't get emotionally attached to the outcome. They know that a hypothesis is just a hypothesis, and that it may be right, in which case they may celebrate, but it may be wrong, in which case a good scientist again will also celebrate, because they go, okay, I figured out what didn't work. What did I get wrong? Where did my calculations go wrong? Where am I going awry? And it's the same thing I tell my clients. I'm like, the result tells us if the inputs are getting the inputs. This is why I don't make people track calories or do anything like that, because it's like, all we need to know is the result. If you have a goal, which is to lose weight, and you're gaining weight, then we know that your inputs don't match up with the output that you're searching for. So, but that comes from that detachment of the emotional piece, and being able to, as you said, not use the result as a confirmation, to going back to what we talked about earlier, to confirm the story. We have the story of like, I can't do this. And then we try a diet, we fail, and we go, see, I knew it. I knew I couldn't do this, rather than it just saying, as you did, that didn't work. How can I edit this? So I really appreciate you bringing a real life story and your own struggles into this. The last two questions I have, Elizabeth, are the same two questions that I ask every guest I have on here. The first is simply, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
Oh, I like that question. I want to see people creating more confidence from the inside out. Instead of feeling like they know better, they can tell me this, they can give me this. I really believe that every single person, it's just like a baby, right? A baby is born with those internal hunger cues, and somewhere along the line, we are told to ignore them or forget them. But the reality is they're still within us, right? It's a gift that every single one of us has. And if you can reconnect with that gift, we don't it just eliminates kind of what we started with, the chaos, the confusion, and it brings that confidence and the ability to be intentional based on your unique body and your unique needs. And that's what I really feel like I want to shout it from the rooftops, that you have that in you. We just need to find it.
Yeah, I love that. And we've come full circle. Everything comes back to where we started. The last question is, if you had one action step for listeners to start making any change that they're trying to implement in their life a little bit easier, whether it's changing their diet, whether it's creating the change that you just mentioned, one action step that they can start with right now, today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, what should they do?
I believe that having a mindful eating practice is the number one success indicator for anyone in their health goals. Because if you can listen to the cues of your body, you will have balance with food. So, my suggestion would be the next meal that you eat, whenever you listen to this, sit down for 10 to 15 minutes and pay attention to it. Check in with your body before, check in with your body during, and then stop when you feel what I say a satisfied number, or I like to say like 8 out of 10 full, where it's like I'm satisfied and I can move on. And that's a really great place to start connecting that mind body connection with food.
If you're working on changing your diet, exercise, or other habits around food and fitness, you have to check out My Body Tutor. My Body Tutor is the world's leading nutrition coaching platform that helps people find their healthy weight and keep it forever through sustainable habit change. And you know, as a listener of this show, that when it comes to creating change, it's all about sustainability and consistency. And when it comes to diet, exercise, and getting in shape, My Body Tutor solves the problem of consistency through one-on-one coaching, customized plans, and daily accountability. And as a bonus for you, they're offering $50 off your first month. But what really makes my body tutor so unique is they offer daily accountability with a real human coach. And I know because I'm one of them. I have been working with my body tutor since 2020. There's so much misinformation, so much nonsense out there in the health and wellness space, but not with my body tutor. My body tutor is the real deal. They are changing lives. I've seen it, I've been a part of it, and I'm honored to continue to grow with them. And you don't have to take my word for it. Check out mybodytutor.com where you will see hundreds of testimonials and reviews. And as a special bonus, for listeners of this show, you will get $50 off your first month. Just click the link in the show notes or go to mybodytutor.com and tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you in your intake questionnaire, and you'll automatically get a huge discount. And remember, they offer a money-back, risk-free guarantee, so this is a no-brainer for you. And no joke, I really do work for them. So if you want to work with me personally, ask for Paul as your tutor. Once again, tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you for $50 off your first month. Start with no risk and see how the power of a coach with daily accountability can literally change your life.